Hi, everyone. It's Nancy Reyes with For Your Canine.
And Joanne Soike with For Better, For Worse.
Let us know you're there. Tonight, we're going to have an interesting discussion. One near and dear to our hearts is about dog rescue. Joanne and I have both been involved in dog rescue for a long time. And we have always, we work with those dogs, and we've also worked with certain rescues for different things throughout the years. Hi Beth. I had 7 rescues of my own. I only have 2 of those left now. The rest have since passed. But tonight we have Pam Abare, who was with the Illinois Doberman Rescue. We worked together quite a few years ago, assessing dogs and working with that rescue. So one of the reasons we wanted to do this particular discussion tonight is we've been in rescue a long time. We've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And one of the things that really sticks out about Pam is how well she ran her the Illinois Doberman Rescue, and the decisions that were made. And even if there were difficult decisions, she always did them with conviction and always with the dog's welfare in mind, no matter what decision. So I wanted to kind of open up that conversation because I think I see rescues going in such a different direction these days. In that we're saving dogs that maybe shouldn't be, we're putting dogs out into the world that shouldn't be, and wondering like why is that going that way and what's happening. And also we're wanting to rescue dogs, but we have to think about how we affect the general public, right? So anyway, those are all things that we like to kind of talk about and discuss and all that. Joanne, if you have something before we start Pam with questions.
Yeah, so I think first I'm just going to say we're getting a little bit of feedback. So if any of you guys have Facebook open on your own, can you close it? Because it sounds like it's getting some reverb coming through. So just to give a little correction, Pam was with Illinois Doberman Rescue, and then I believe you got married, right? You moved before you got married, or no, you're not married yet.
No, I'm married and divorced. I moved because I was going to stop doing rescue. So I thought I'm going to move, and because otherwise you just do rescue forever and ever and ever. And I was like, oh, I really want to run a cafe. So I moved to North Carolina and I stepped down from Illinois Doberman Rescue. No hard feelings. I just stepped down and moved. But that didn't work as far as rescue goes. And I started a whole other one.
I think following Pam on Facebook was one of the first ones that you got was a 3-legged rooster or one-legged rooster or something you rescued.
Yes, so Joe started the whole rescue again. His name's Joe.
Joe. All right.
Joe.
So it's kind of funny. I think once you become a true diehard, you sort of can never get away with it. It's like the mafia, right?
Yes.
So just curious for you, Pam, like how did you actually get started in rescue?
It was about 1998, and I was a teacher of children with visual impairments. That was my full-time job, and I started volunteering with an all-breed rescue based out of Naperville, Illinois, called Adopt, and I loved it. But Dobermans were the thing for me. So I kind of joined the little group that loved Dobermans, and there was this set group that really, really loved Dobermans. So we kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then there was more Dobermans and more Dobermans, and this all-breed facility just really became half Dobermans and half other things, other breeds, other cats. And then they finally said, hey, can you guys go and start your own? Because we're getting to have too many Dobermans to be an all-breed. And I was like, you know what? We can do this. Sat down. We really worked out the numbers. There was a core group of us that really sat down and figured it out. And in 2003, we started Illinois Doberman Rescue. And it was basically based out of my home. And then it was all foster-based. And then sometimes we paid some boarding facilities. But we kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. That's how we started.
And Dobermans are one of my favorite breeds. I don't have one. I wish I did. But Pam also reached out when she wasn't sure about a temperament, and when I started my business, I tried to help out as much as I could because I just love the breed so much. So we got some dogs that were um, interesting to say the least. And given that Dobermans are big dogs and things like that, there was some difficult decisions to be made. So and I respected her for that and admired that, because a lot of and back then, it's not the situation we have these days, where we got to save them all. A lot of the rescues we work with at that time, I worked with the Australian Shepherd Rescue and the German Shepherd Rescue and all those, and they all were very like-minded in that way about, which ones because there's so many coming in and so few homes for them to go to. So it was, difficult choices and decisions to be made. So, which is why I wanted to really talk about some of the, how you started, and so one of the things that you were really great about is making sure they got with the right home and medical and all that. So one of the things that Joanne told me, that you used to have at any one time a ton of medical dogs in your house. So how did that work?
It's funny how you just sort of develop a routine and a thing that works for you. So a lot of times what we would do is we would bring in dogs, and we would they'd come straight to me if we knew they had medical problems, broken leg, blasto. I mean, I think I had everything you could possibly imagine. ACL tears, hip FHOs, all that kind of stuff. They would all come straight to me. I had my house set up where it really was safe. Like I might have 20 dogs at my house. You would not even realize it when you came in, because it was so well managed. It was not dogs everywhere, especially with medical dogs. You have to keep them separated. Especially like I did a lot of heartworm dogs. So if we get dogs in that would go to the vet, we'd find out they're heartworm positive, and they would move to me, and I would treat them, because that would take 3-4 months sometimes to treat them. So I had X pens in my house literally all the way around. So I'd have a giant crate for those who couldn't handle an X pen, and then an X pen, and then a giant crate, and then an X pen, and literally went around my living room like that. And it was very safe. It was very clean. It was nice. It was calm, and it worked really, really well because it wasn't a kennel environment. So they weren't barking all the time. It was very relaxed, and that worked really well for the medical dogs. I also had 2 amazing vets that I worked with all the time, and that is really also key. But I spent a lot of time going to the vet. I mean, it was probably every other day I was at the vet, working, especially if you have a dog with like a broken leg or bandage changes or that kind of stuff. But I was very comfortable, and my vets really felt comfortable with me. I was able to do a lot of the stuff at my house, whether it was like sub-Q fluids or bandage changes or whatever it might be.
So this goes. So for the Dobermans, like the medical cases, what were the majority of the reasons you guys would end up with those type of cases?
I had no problem saying yes to any Doberman that was not known human aggression, because that's something I do. I personally don't believe a dog that will actually run and bite you is a dog that should be placed. So if someone said, I have a dog, it's got a broken leg, I have a dog, we know, the shelter would call me, and owner surrender, couldn't afford it. They had obstructions they couldn't afford. They'd be at the vet clinic. The vet clinic would call me and say, look, we just took in a Doberman, we've got this. So I would say heartworm was one of probably the most
common.
Yeah, the most common ailment. I had a lot of broken legs, but I wouldn't say a lot compared to like heartworm.
Okay, right.
Yeah, heartworm was probably the biggest one. We had so many different cases. I can't even. I'm just trying to think of everything we had. It was so many.
I think you've got a lot of allergies, right? I mean, skin issues.
A lot of mange.
Yeah.
And a couple sarcoptic mange, which is the contagious one. Again, I had no problem saying yes to everything because I had a way to make it work. I literally could let a dog in, let a dog out without ever touching that dog. Because with sarcoptic mange, you have to be really careful. With demodectic mange, it was no problem. It's not contagious to me. So, again, I would just separate and treat, and you just staying on top of it was not a problem for me. I mean, I still own 6 very medical dogs right now, none of which are Dobermans. But yeah, my eye drops, I must have about 10 things of eye drops now. Because it's bulldogs.
Do you still have Zoomy?
I still have Zoomy. She is has one tooth left. She has one tooth. She's still about that big.
Can you tell kind of her story?
Sure. Zoomy was dropped at a vet clinic at a month old. She was a teacup chihuahua. She fit in a wine glass. And a really wonderful supporter volunteer for Doberman Rescue vet called her and said, knowing that it was a small breed, she did a lot of small breeds, and asked her if she would take this little puppy who they wanted to euthanize, but they were okay with not euthanizing it. They just couldn't afford it because her legs were so deformed. They were completely stick straight. So I took her because she said, can you take her and help her? And I said, of course I can. So I took her up to my vet, who was like, I don't know what to do with this dog because you couldn't bend her legs. They were like stick straight. So he literally taped her to popsicle sticks with, I have a picture of her literally on popsicle sticks. That's how tiny she was. And for months we had to go retape her so that her legs were bent, and it actually worked. So one leg worked where you could bend and unbend. The other one did not. So we did 2 surgeries on it and he just couldn't get it to work. But he said she's fine. She's a 2-pound dog. It's not a lot of weight to be carrying on her. So if she has to swing it around, she'll be fine. But then she also had ulcers on her eyes. So then we had to do that. So I ended up keeping her just because I felt like she was going to be a hard, difficult dog for someone. You also have to be really careful with her because she can't walk on, she can only walk on carpet or grass. And she honestly, she was so small, I thought she was going to get lost at somebody's house or behind the refrigerator or something. So she actually stays in a human playpen in my living room. And then obviously she comes out. I have an area where she comes out and plays. But yeah, she's still here. She's welcome to join us at any time you want. She'll be happy.
So let me ask you, because this goes back to, so most of these dogs came in, were you mostly owner surrender or shelter or both? What was where did the dogs mostly come from?
Shelters, definitely shelters. And because we were Illinois Doberman Rescue, but so well known, almost every shelter called us with, whether it was Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin. Wisconsin had a rescue, but they were a lot smaller. Iowa didn't have a rescue at the time. And Indiana didn't have a rescue at the time. A few have popped up since then. So we really did take them from everywhere. But we took a lot from North Carolina and actually Tennessee at the time. Those were the ones that tended to be HER1 positive when they were coming up. That was back when they had a rescue, I think. But again, we were probably one of the biggest ones that I know of back then. I don't know how it is now. But so we really took a lot of shelter dogs. Owner surrender dogs, we did do quite a few, but it was definitely, I'd probably say 75-25 is what I'd say. And a lot of times the shelters would tell the people before they surrendered the dog to please try us first. And so we would get them that way. So I was glad. That's a much better way to take them directly from the owner, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk volumes, can you, how many dogs did Illinois Doberman Rescue have at one time, just on an average?
I'm trying to think. I know that in 13 years that I ran it, we placed 5,000 animals, which is a lot. That's a lot for a foster-based rescue. 5,000 dogs and cats, but the majority of them being dogs. The majority of those also being Dobermans. I would say we probably had, 40 to 60 in the program at all times. I usually had 10. So my 10, and then let's say there was, 8 to 10 at the kennel, that's 20 right there. So then you'd have, maybe 60 animals, not necessarily dogs. Mm-hmm. And then what I tended to do, and I think what worked really, really well for our situation, is I was sort of that central base, and I would get the dogs either healed from the heartworm or from whatever it was, or I would take a dog in that might have a behavior issue. I would assess them. If I felt, comfortable, I would say, oh, can such and such, this is what the dog's like at my house. And I think people felt very comfortable taking a dog from me to foster. And so that did work really well. So I would take them in, and then they would go out to another foster. Instead of taking the unknown, I could say, look, this dog is great with other dogs, or this dog is good with small dogs, or not good with dogs at all. And so I think that helped a lot.
Mm-hmm. So of the dogs that came through the shelter or what have you, how many did you feel, well, what percent, because I know it's hard to remember how many that were human aggressive or had issues?
I don't know for sure if, I don't know how many per year that we did have to euthanize. There's a huge difference to what I learned as I went along. When I started rescue, I was I'm going to save them all. That really was my attitude.
Yeah.
I think the dog that really changed my mind was a dog I will never forget named Taco, that I worked for months and months and months on food aggression. And I thought, oh my God, I solved the problem, because I did, with me. And that's exactly the thing. I solved him with me. Could he live with me? Sure. So then I felt like, well, once I fixed him, I could place him. So I placed him, and I obviously let people know about anytime there's any type of negative. I always tell people positive and negative in all respects of the dog, because that's the most important thing to me. So they had him about 2 weeks, and in the 2 weeks they had him, he went from the problem that I thought I had solved to actually chasing them out of the kitchen and biting him in the face, because he walked into the kitchen. But what they were doing wrong, you can't train somebody sometimes. They were putting the food down and leaving because they were uncomfortable, even though he hadn't necessarily done anything, but because I told them he had been or was food aggressive. Well, they created it by making it even worse. I'm not saying they did anything wrong. That is a normal person beating their dog. And so he actually bit them in the face. He actually caused damage. He actually caused stitches. And he was kind of my first, like, wow, what is okay and not okay? And I sort of learned Dobermans are a very reactive breed. That's a huge difference. And I think that's sort of stuff that I learned. And I think I brought you a lot of reactive dogs.
Yes, you did.
And that's so different. And that's a very placeable dog. It just has to be in the right situation. It is not a good city dog. We have a dog right now up for adoption that is a very large American bulldog that is very dog aggressive. And that's why we still have him. He's doing great, but he can't be in the city. There's no way I'll place him in the city. There's no way I'll place him he has to have a solid fenced yard. So, I mean, that's a placeable dog. He's not human aggressive, but he could cause some serious problems if he was placed.
Right.
So I'm willing to hold on to that. That's okay.
Right. Well, and that's what I wanted to kind of highlight a little bit, because having a dog being human aggressive versus dog aggressive, the human aggression is
Exactly.
it's a bigger problem, right? A dog can live with reactivity or dog aggression, live a nice long happy life with no problems. A dog that has people aggression, it's difficult, and most of the general population, as rescues, aren't thinking about. You cannot put that dog in the hands of a regular pet owner and expect everything to be great and blame them for the dog having issues.
And it's honestly not fair for a regular pet owner to have to live with that dog. How is that enjoyable for the dog or the person? I've gotten to that point where if the dog there's a big difference to a Chihuahua that might have some people aggression to a Doberman that has people aggression. We did place a Chihuahua that guards things, and he did guard things like a washcloth if it fell on the ground. But that is a 5-pound dog that can be worked with, and it is worked with. We've figured out problems, but that is a huge difference than a Doberman who's going to go after you if you're coming to get a washcloth that you didn't even know he was guarding. So I think that that's where I changed over the 20 years, is that it's not fair, and it's not fair and one wrong move and you've caused damage to someone's child or someone's, I mean, that's just how I look at it.
Yeah.
And it's pretty rare that we did have a dog. I'm okay with putting a dog to sleep that is going to harm a person.
Yep.
And honestly, if you look at our success in rescue, it's so rare we would ever get a phone call where a dog has hurt a human to return a dog or to tell me that happened. And honestly, I think that's so important. I
was just going to say, I remember my very first experience. I was a sort of a new trainer, and I could fix everybody, right? Just need love and time. And my first dog with Illinois Doberman Rescue was this cute little shepherd cattle dog mix, and she was adorable and easy peasy, and she got adopted no problem. And the second dog, I remember being on the phone with Pam, and she said, "Listen, this is you're the last stop for this dog. If he does not do well, this is, we're not placing him. So, that's what you're doing. You're not trying to, get this dog out in public and, give him some skills. You're really trying to let us know if this dog is safe or not." And I think it was 4 months. And I remember being, in contact, and Pam was always asking, "How's he doing? What's going on?" And the final straw was when we were working something in the yard, and this couple with a stroller just walked by on the sidewalk, and he rushed the gate, and he was up on that gate, and he was so out of his mind, just barking and snarling. And it was like, accidents always happen, right? So if that gate got open, I had no doubt in my mind, watching his behavior, he would have gone after those people. So unfortunately, that was the right decision for that dog, but sad.
And I think you used a really good word, safe.
Yeah.
Is he safe?
So, and Lori Menarsic just posted something. Lori used to work with or I think she was president, I believe, of the Border Collie Rescue. And she said, and this is why I wanted to bring that up. She brought up something really good here. She did say that she also made those difficult decisions with human aggression, but she lost volunteers over it. Mm-hmm. Because the volunteers, wanted to save that particular dog, or they felt that connection with that dog. But that is the right decision to do. And did you guys ever lose volunteers or have issues with volunteers over some?
Honestly, we may have. You don't know for sure. Nobody actually said that to us, but that is something that was discussed on the way in with volunteers.
Okay.
And I do think that's important, but I also, you're always going to lose people. That's always going to be a topic that's going to be hard to discuss. Mm-hmm. But the other thing too is something I've always said to people is, do you want to own this dog? And usually the answer is no. It's not like I'm making this decision because I feel like I just think I'm going to put this dog down. I'm doing this for the safety of the general public. I'm not, and it's very different if it's your own dog and your own dog, something happens and they become aggressive, or your own dog becomes sick. You're willing to do a lot more, but all of a sudden I'm giving you a dog and I feel responsible for what you're doing with the dog that I just gave you.
Right.
So I want to feel like I'm not going to give you the perfect dog all the time, but I don't want to give you a dog that's going to hurt somebody.
Yeah. And that, I think, is the thing, right? It's like, you're a dog rescuer, so you're rescuing the dog, but you also have to do what's okay or right for the general public.
Yes.
You cannot put a dog out in the world that's going to hurt people. It's just, it's irresponsible. But I'm seeing more and more of those dogs coming through my doors, as with people who've adopted those dogs, right? Yeah. And then you have to be the guy, and Joanne can attest to this. You have to be the one to say, return that dog to that rescue because he shouldn't be with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think Pam really hit on it earlier, right? I think there's a lot of people in rescue who the dog does okay with them, but the hardest thing to learn is when you send them out there, right? These people are like, yeah, mm-hmm, sure, totally. And they don't understand, right? Like,
exactly. And are you even listening when I'm talking to you? No. You write it down too. But yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's you have to, as a dog rescue person or as a rescue, you have to your first job should be for the greater good of the people. And yes, people are going to make mistakes and people are going to do dumb things with their dogs. So you have to make sure the dog that goes out from your rescue or from the shelter or whatever is going to be able to handle life with people who aren't as dog savvy as volunteers. Because you're right. Joanne and I both did a lot of fostering over the years, and it's like some of the dogs you're like, oh my God, it's like you have to find a special home because most people wouldn't be able to deal with you, or some dogs were so easy. They're like, yep, this is good.
Yep.
Right.
And deal with you is another thing. I wouldn't want to live with a certain dog. I probably wouldn't want to live with a dog that Joanne has because it's busy and I'm like lazy and I have bulldogs now. But that's different, you know. That's different from being unsafe, or
Right.
you know, like I said, I've got that American Bulldog right now, and I can't begin to tell you how many adopters I've made angry because I say no. It clearly says on that bio what that dog needs, and I'm not saying that because I don't like you. I'm saying that because I want the neighborhood to be safe. I'm not saying he's gonna, you know, again, I don't think he would hurt a human, but there's reactivity that can become displaced aggression, and that's why I don't want to set him up to fail. But that's different from, like we said, human aggression.
Yeah. Laura, yeah. Liz, you're right. Too much no kill is insane. And Lori says there's a lot of dogs that are not in foster homes. They're kenneled all week and then they come out for adoptathons. Yeah. So we've seen that go really bad. And I would probably say, Lori, a lot. Because we're seeing, I just, the reason this topic just came up, because we are seeing at our facility, we are seeing a lot more dogs coming in with human aggression and dog aggression that are adopted out from different places. And it's becoming quite concerning, right? With these unsuspecting people. And it is heartbreaking for these people, because as a trainer, you're on the other side of that saying, yeah, this dog shouldn't be with you, right? And it's a tough conversation to have, but and some people, they just love the dog and they just want to keep it. But I'm seeing that more now than I had before. So I'm just like wondering what the hell is going on. That is, we're getting more and more dogs that are aggressive to people. It's crazy.
And I do wonder, I don't know how the foster homes, I mean, I'm happy with how we do things because the majority of our dogs do get to experience a foster home. Right. And our foster homes are very practical foster homes. They're not just pet the dog all weekend, but they're there to actually tell us a little bit more about the dog, whether it's good or bad. And I think that's one of the reasons we don't have didn't have and still don't have a high return rate, is that we are as honest as we can be. But I don't know if everyone has that way of saying, hey, can you just take this dog for the weekend and give us a little bit more on the dog versus going straight to an adoption event like you talked about. I think that I'm not a big fan of adopting dogs straight at an adoptathon like that type of situation. Anyway, I really don't think it works as an adoption event if we don't know the dog well.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. You guys did a one or two at my facility, and that was even at the facility with all the space we had, it was still very challenging. Yeah.
Very stressful.
Yeah. It was still tough.
Yeah.
So Shelly said he had a Malinois that was really smart and fun. It was super strong, pulled while walking on a leash. We had to decline to adopt because of his pulling. We live in a city and exercise would be on leash and we couldn't handle. How could we work with him so he would have been adoptable by us? Well, Shelly, one of the things that Illinois Doberman Rescue did back then, and I think some rescues still do, they do reach out to other dog trainers and get them in. They have their foster homes come in and train, work with the dogs before they get adopted. I know we had a lot of Illinois Doberman Rescue dogs that came through training and all that, because I used to do it for free, so that way the dog can be more adoptable. It's just really hard to find those situations, Yeah,
and I would put out there, right? If you are a rescue or you are a foster home, reach out to some dog trainers. I know I would absolutely let people in my beginning class, to work with a foster dog that's not theirs to help them be more adoptable. And I'm sure Nancy would do the same, right? So
right.
we definitely want to better dogs and help them get into homes, because we're still very supportive of rescue and placing dogs.
Yeah. Well, and so Pam, how did you choose, or how did you decide, like, okay, this dog, can you guys take it and do some training with it? How did you make those decisions based on your situation?
A lot of times it was, and another thing that I want to say when I saw Shelly's comment was that we also, and I don't know if other rescues do this, is that we give everybody, if we think it's the right situation, first of all, we don't place them in the wrong situation and then do this, but we also give everybody a 2-week trial period, because I truly don't believe that I see the same dog that you see. Because my situation is completely different from your situation. I might live in the boonies and I'm like, oh, this dog never barks. And then I place it with you and you're in the city and it barks like all the time. And that's not your fault. And I don't ever want an adopter to feel bad. So I really do stress that is that I don't think it's fair for us to assume that just because I tell you it's the perfect dog, that it is the perfect dog for your situation. And so I do give people a 2-week trial period, and I say, work with me. It's not about the money. It's about the right home and the dog being happy and the person being happy. So in Shelly's situation, maybe she could have had, I don't know for sure, but maybe like if she had the 2-week trial, maybe after a week, the dog might not be pulling as much because it might have just come straight out of a kennel and it was so excited to be there, but we don't know. And so that's kind of like, I just placed a dog here that was one of the shyest dogs, and I wasn't sure if where I placed him was the perfect spot, but I thought it might be. And so I did all my background check and did all that. And I actually drove him there and dropped him off. And I was really worried. Oh my God, pictures of him now. He's the happiest dog ever. It was the perfect spot. But I didn't know that. So I feel like a trial period is really helpful. But how did I decide, Nancy, back to yours, was how did I decide if I had the dog at my house and I felt like it was like I couldn't get control of the dog, that it would need to be placed. I did not take time to walk the dogs because shockingly enough, I had no time. And so I didn't take the time to really walk the dogs and do all that. And my neighborhood was so different that if I felt like the dog was really kind of bonkers at my house, like there was something going on, I felt like another foster wasn't able to take it, that's when I would call you. And it, like I said, not human aggressive, just wasn't, I wanted to kind of understand this dog a little bit better. That's when I would do it. Or if the kennel would call, if one of our main volunteers at the kennel would call and say, look, I'm really worried about this dog. This is what the dog is doing. It's growling, but I can't tell if it's the kennel or if it's men or if it's men with hats or, that's when I would do it, because we would really want to assess a dog like that further. And so that's usually when I would call you or Joanne or somebody that would be willing to foster or take the dog in.
Yeah, and Amy put a really good point on here. Amy says hi, by the way. That we did used to require some dogs have to go to an obedience class, right? We would collect a deposit. So that's I think some people are just going to eat that check, but at least I would say 80% of people definitely followed through and get a good start.
We haven't done that recently because of COVID, but I didn't know if training facilities were open, but people are very uncomfortable going out. And COVID has been bad and good for dogs, I must say. In one area and not in another area. We're creating a lot of pandemic puppies, in my opinion, that have no social skills at all. But then you have dogs are very happy right now because there's none of them at shelters. But yes.
Yeah, that's true. Deb said before you got Mindy, a foster adopted husky from a small rescue that they hadn't vetted him well. After a few days, he started becoming people aggressive. Yeah, and that sometimes happens, especially if they don't get to spend some time in the foster home or whatever. And I know with animal care control, it's just it's a situation. And I remember, and I think it came from IDR. We had a young couple that adopted this Doberman. It was the blue ones, I think, a blue Dobe, and he was just fine. He came to class because he was required to come to class. And 2 weeks in, the dog became really, really, really reactive and aggressive to people, and it never showed any signs of that early on. And that was one of the only, because usually you can see that aggression right away. And I'm like, how did I miss that? Well, it turned out, I think that dog, I don't know if you probably don't remember, so many dogs, he ended up having a brain tumor, and they had to, that's why he became, unpredictable. And it was very, I mean, and that's maybe the only, but those are not very common. That doesn't happen all the time.
Sometimes they settle in and become a little more possessive of things that start showing, but yeah.
No, that was pretty, the shift was happy-go-lucky, I love you, to I'm going to kill you now.
Yeah.
Within a couple of weeks. So, and then they did they had to euthanize them, and they did a
necropsy. Yeah.
And that's what they found, that he had a tumor. It was really bizarre, but one of the few.
Yeah, so speaking of temperaments and different kinds of dogs, Kathy had asked a question. Her niece has a toddler and they're looking for a dog. So, Pam, I know.
I always say go to I call them the sturdy breeds, like labs and beagles and things that are more durable. I just like Dobermans. I was not a big fan of placing with kids. They were fine. I'm not saying, it's just they tend to be more sensitive. That's what I found. Whereas you give them a lab mix and they're just like, hey, just do whatever you want. That's what I found, is the more mixed breeds seem to be better.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always not every dog is that. It's not true necessarily for every dog.
Right. Well, and would you recommend that you go through a foster-based?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're getting a puppy, I think that's different. The only thing I tell puppy, I'm not anti-breeder or anything. Go to a breeder if you like specific, but just meet mom and dad, please. So I always say, just please meet mom and dad, so that it's not like they bring a puppy out, because I do think that says a lot. If you've got socialized mom, socialized dad, and all that, that's great. But same thing with the rescue, if you can see mom, probably not dad normal, but that's great. I think it's helpful.
Right.
Dad's not usually around.
Yeah. Well, no, and that's what I mean. I think it's helpful to do a foster base, because that dog has been in a home for a while.
Yep.
And you could have a good take on what's the dog's temperament and personality and all that stuff. So
exactly.
Oh, they want a dog that's a few years old. Yeah, beagles are pretty sturdy.
I always think beagle mixes are great. And honestly, I mean, I would go to a foster-based one, and I would definitely bring your child. And I just tell people, just because I work with kids, that's what I do. I work with kids under the age of 3, and that's my job. I always say, just don't tell them anything. Tell them you're going to pet dogs. Don't say we're going to go look at dogs to take home, because then you meet that dog and it's not the right dog. So I always sort of be happy about the kids. I just say, you're telling them you're coming to pet dogs. And that way you can assess the dog with the child too.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't show you a dog personally if I didn't think it was going to be good for kids. So hopefully that foster rescue would be like that too.
Wow. Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. Connie has a real good one.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it depends on the intake forms that rescues have. So I'll let Pam talk about it. But how can we help support someone who's considering rehoming, and best encourage them to be honest and transparent about the reasons?
I do that all the time. And honestly, I do it before the dog comes to rescue. I have no problem taking time to post a dog that is spayed or neutered, of course, and has a rabies shot. But just because I will be happy to post a dog for somebody. And I think that the key is telling them to be honest doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It means that we're finding it the right home. And so just like right now, I've got a dog posted that we don't have in our program. And I just wrote everything about it that's negative and positive, because if I can help it not come into rescue and have the dog go straight to a new home, that makes me so much happier. And I have no problem taking time for that. And so even if the dog has nipped at a child, that's okay. It's not a good thing. I'm saying it's okay to rehome. We just find a home with no kids, and we be honest about it. And that way the dog doesn't lose its home again. And I think some of the rescues, I don't know, obviously all the rescues, but I think sometimes the attitude of the person like myself who you're talking to makes a huge difference.
Yes.
You're rehoming your dog. It's not necessarily your fault. Things happen in life. COVID happens, or you have kids, or, whatever might happen. All of a sudden you got married and they have 2, and it's just not working with the 4 dogs, or there's reasons, and we can't judge people on that. We have to help the dog. And so I think that has a lot to do with it too, is the attitude of the rescue that you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I just think it discourages people, and then they get upset, and then they don't want to tell the truth about the dog.
Right. Well, yeah, or they've gotten, some of the rescues are not so nice, and they've gotten, and they don't want to, then they're like, well, I'm never going to adopt again ever.
Exactly. Some of the rescues are insanely strict, and I think that's kind of discourages a lot of people too, but that has nothing to do with giving up your dog. But yeah, I just think every situation should be case by case and not black and white. And that's what I see a lot of.
So here's a question. So when somebody decides they're going to rehome their dog, for what you may think is a not so great reason, it sheds too much, and they got a husky or a shepherd. It's like, well,
why'd you get it? You think that in your head, though. You don't say it out loud. That's the key. Now, when I started doing this 20 years ago, I said it out loud. And that didn't help the dog, because guess where the dog went? To the shelter.
Right.
And then I had to go get the dog from the shelter, who now had upper respiratory and was sick as can be. And I learned, it took me years to get rid of my attitude and to just go for the dog. So you just got to think it in your head. But Ellen is right. No hurting dogs with toddlers. I am 100% on that. I literally always say that in my bio. No toddlers. This is a herding breed, so no toddlers. No kids under 5.
Right.
Or 10, depending on the dogs. But yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how all the rescues run these days, but I know, you know, when I did Doe Rescue, Pam was really big on the final decision, right? That we'll approve the apps and we'll make sure that the person's kosher, but the final decision, if you're not comfortable with your dog going to that home, you get to say no.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you should be the biggest part of it if you are the foster home.
Yes. Yeah. Well, one day I went to do a home visit. It wasn't Friday hour, it was for another rescue. And they told me they're going to put the dog was going to live in the basement. I'm like, yeah, you're not getting the dog. It's like, oh, was that so? I didn't say it. I go, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're not getting the dog, because why would you want a dog and keep it in the basement? So anyway, yes. I think it was for a lab rescue or something like that. It was some I can't remember who it was for at the time, but yeah, they shared with me that it was going to live in the basement. I go, okay.
Yep. Not a good one.
No.
Yeah, and you know, Michelle, it's a good story, right? So she said that she was her third home, that the dog that she adopted, and it just wasn't the right home for the first two times, right? So, and that happens. You can have a perfectly great dog that just needs the right place to thrive.
Yes.
Right. No, and it's and that's one of the things Lori says, one of the beliefs, Lori Mo, that change after being involved with rescue is not always the environment that causes issue with the dog. Well, that's the thing. It's like a lot of rescues, and I hear it more these days. Well, if the people wouldn't do that, or the people wouldn't behave that way, or if the people wouldn't do this, well, people aren't going to change who they are. That we have to, the dog. It's like any relationship, right? You want to find somebody who's going to compliment you and to enjoy being together, not somebody who's going to be difficult to deal with and to work with.
Match.com for dogs, exactly. It is, though. That is exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, you can't fault somebody just because I don't necessarily wouldn't want to be married to your husband or your boyfriend. Doesn't mean that your husband or your boyfriend is bad.
No.
It's just not right for me. But that's why I said I really changed my attitude. Like in the beginning, I was just like, everybody, it's your fault. You just did this, and you should, you know. But that's why I said I think that's one of the biggest things about rescue is being able to keep your volunteers really has to do with personality of accepting each other as personalities as volunteers as well.
Right.
So it's that same thing. You really have to I think people are just not as open-minded with many things.
Yeah, because I have just found that some of the dogs we get through here and some of the rescues that they go through, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? It's like, it's not something that you saw that much of. Like I've had in the last, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months, dogs that were people aggressive. I'm like, what the hell? And they adopted it. And these poor unsuspecting people are like, oh my God. And then they feel bad because you got to tell them, it's like, well, this is not a really ideal dog for any home. And
Right.
and you're right, but that's such a good way of putting it, right? Just because your husband, you may not want to be married to that husband, but somebody will.
Yes, exactly.
There's somebody for everyone, and it's like you got to figure out where that place is, right? And that's
exactly.
And
I think too, right? People, I don't care who you are, if you've been doing rescue for a long time, if you've been training dogs for a long time, even if you're not a trainer, right? If you've had dogs and you've been successful in your dog sporting, and you're not John Q. Public, right? And John Q. Public does things that we think are crazy, and why would you do that? But it's pretty much the norm in that world, and you have to go into placing dogs with that mentality as opposed to, well, who's going to let their kids stick their their fingers in the food bowl? Lots of people are going to do that.
Right.
Exactly.
So, so Pam, so let me ask you, and this is going to go into a more, so I know you got married and moved away, but what was the most, because I know burnout's pretty big in rescue, as it is in dog training, because it's there. Obviously in rescue, it's a lot more. The burnout. How do you try to protect yourself from some of that?
The way that I run my rescue now is so different than when I ran IDR, because when I ran IDR, it really was my entire life, because I also ran an in-home doggy daycare, dog boarding. So it was 24/7. Now I'd probably say it's a little more balanced. So when I run the rescue that I have now, I also have a job that is not dog related. It's kid related, which can be similar. So I do that, but I've made it so that I can do stuff now. So like, I don't have 20 dogs. I just have 10, which seems like a lot to most people. It's really not when you have 6 disabled bulldogs and then, some other ones. But so I've made it so that I actually do stuff for me now, which is, it's not just dogs. And I think that's a lot of it. People used to wonder how I would turn off my phone at night. Well, I did, because it was literally 24/7. So when I turned off my phone at whatever time it was, I got up at 4 a.m, and that's when I started. I probably turned off my phone at like 7 p.m. If something happened overnight, I gave you an out, and then, I'm like, I turned off my phone, because otherwise it's just all the time. Turned off my computer, turned off my phone. And then I started again in the morning at 4 a.m. That's just how I was. But I don't, everybody has to do it differently. But for me, the dogs were not the time consuming part as much as the emails, the phone calls, that type of stuff. But I think delegating too. In the beginning, I thought I had to do everything. And then you start realizing you don't, once you find really, really good volunteers, honestly, where you can depend on them as well. And so I think that was key. Was delegating some of the work,
Well, because I remember it was your whole,
whole life, my whole house, my whole life. Yeah.
So I'm thinking that's just,
I really did, for the 13 years that it was at my house. I really did love it. I mean, I loved it. So it wasn't a problem. I just knew that if you don't, it's not something that you can just stop, and that, like, everyone would say, well, why don't you just stay in Illinois? Why are you moving? And I was like, you can't. You have to move. You can't just stop doing rescue, because everybody knows you and everybody knows your phone number. But I knew I wanted to start a little cafe. So I knew I had, it was perfect opportunity for me to just step down at that point, and then start a new one that starts with Richard. Yeah.
Right. So you were feeling that lack of balance, if you will.
At the end, yeah. And I think a lot of that had to do with that I actually had a significant other now that loved to do stuff, and it was the same stuff I like to do. And so we loved traveling. We loved doing stuff and going out and hiking and drinking wine and at wineries and stuff like that. That's really hard to do when you have 20 dogs in your house. So it really is. And it's really hard to find a pet sitter when you have 20 dogs in your house. So it was kind of getting, I thought, this is the perfect time, and I'd been doing it for 20 years, basically.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it worked really well. It's really also hard again, I didn't have, my job consisted of the dogs as well. So it was a lot easier to have a job where you had to work. If somebody's trying to run a rescue and work like at an office and then come home, I think that would be very difficult to do it the way I did it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was lucky that the boarding part paid my bills. I could actually pay my bills that way.
Yeah. So what would you say to, what would you say to a potential person that would want to adopt a dog? What they should, what would ensure, or what would help find the best dog for them? Like what were some of the things they need to tell you, the rescue, saying, we're looking for a dog and these are the things that we want, or whatever, so that, because a lot of times with dogs, it's an impulse buy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's cute, it's adorable,
I think rescues don't allow it to be an impulse buy, in a sense, because there's so much time going into, they have to fill an application, you end up talking to them. I also think it's really different when you run Doberman Rescue versus another rescue, because when you apply for a dog through me, you're applying for a specific dog. Whereas when you apply for a Doberman, you might be applying for a specific Doberman, but there's so many Dobermans that you kind of know what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that makes sense, but like right now, if I get an application for, the 15-year-old dog, by the way, that I have right now with 3 legs and 1 eye, if somebody's applying for him, I'm talking to them directly about that dog to see if that dog is a good fit for them.
Okay.
And I also think it makes a huge difference if you pick up the phone, because I really think email gets so messed up sometimes that I try really hard to pick up the phone and talk to somebody. I mean, if I'm getting 20 applications because I have a puppy, that's different. But if they're applying for a specific dog and I just feel like it's better to pick up the phone and talk to them, because I just feel like you get a better feel for them. And I think that's what rescues don't, and it's time consuming. And I think rescues don't take the time. They automatically see that you put in there that or I call your vet and they say, oh, well, there's no heartworm prevention on this file. And then I think rescues jump into it immediately and go, oh my God, this person doesn't do heartworm, you're denied. I pick up the phone and they say, oh no, I do heartworm. This is the way I do it. I have 4 dogs, so I use ivermectin drops. That's how I do it. So I wouldn't qualify. Like, you'd call and you find out that I don't do heartworm, but I do. So I just think that when you take the time to really listen, and if they don't do heartworm, I'm not saying I'm going to give you the dog, but I would educate them. And I think it's when you have, again, it's all about attitude, I think, and taking the time. But that is harder. Like animal controls can't do that, obviously. They don't have the time for that. But I think rescues can. I think when you take a dog in, I think you owe it to the people that are wanting to adopt your dog and spend money, more money than they would normally at like animal control, because your dog is vetted and because of all that, to take the time to really talk to them and to understand them. And if they aren't the right fit, explain to them why it's not a good fit, but not necessarily you're denying them altogether.
Yeah.
But I hear so many things about how people get such a bad taste of rescue. Mm-hmm. And it's heartbreaking for me, even if it's not my rescue.
Right.
I just think that's terrible because there's so many dogs out there needing help.
Right. Deb asked, do rescues do temperament testing when they first receive a dog?
We don't go and temperament test. That's what foster homes to me are key for. Mm-hmm. It's more like real life testing versus I'm going to go do this, which means I am going to feed you and I'm going to take away the bowl to see that. So in a sense, I'm temperament testing, but I don't go with like a plastic hand and do all that. I just see what are they like in this situation and this situation. So I don't know what every rescue does, but that's what we do. We try really hard to put most of them into foster homes. And there's, like I said, just a few that might not be.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a couple of tests, and Joanne, I don't, that I think the shelters use that. I think it goes back to what you had said about being more honest about the dog. So they put the dog like, he's a go-getter. That means he's really.
Yeah.
You have to. If you're a dog rescue, you know what that means.
I love the wording. Some of the wording in the bios. Yeah. And I might use some of those catchy words too, but I really am like, I do what I call the anti-adoption, which means I tell you all the negatives. Here's everything he does wrong at my house. Doesn't mean he's going to be like that at your house. But I really try to do that so that people really know what to be ready for. And then if he doesn't display that, great. He's different at your house, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Because you know, then, but the thing is, most people don't have that knowledge base. Like, we know what that means.
Right.
And, those of us that are in the dog world know what a go-getter means.
Yep.
Or a wallflower.
Yeah.
But most of the Joe public's like, oh, wallflower. That's
everyone. Really, I'm telling you, he's jumping all over the world. Yeah. It's like he's jumping all over you. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, honestly, if you adopt from animal control or an animal shelter, which is still amazing, it would be very hard for them to judge them because you can't judge a dog in a kennel. I just don't think you can fully. No. I just think it's so unfair. They're so excited. And like those meet and greets on leashes are just so not my thing. That's another thing that we do that probably other rescues don't do is I do not want you to bring your dog. If I tell you it's good with dogs, it's because it's good with dogs. It doesn't mean it's good with your dog. I just say, please keep your dog at home and please put up a baby gate for days between the dogs. You know, I think that makes such a difference because another analogy I use is if I just met you, I am not going to get in your bed tonight and sleep over. But that's what you're asking these dogs to do.
right.
Like, here, get along. You know, and that's so unfair. Like, let's let all the pressure, like, you know, calm down. And like, there's no fear at the ends of the leashes. And I just think it makes such a difference. So my dog doesn't have to have run of the house when it gets there. Put my dog in a crate or behind a baby gate or something for a couple of days.
Right.
And then, you know, see how you're feeling. And if you feel like if they are play bowing the next day and it is so obvious, that's fine. But if they're still sort of like on edge, like, you know, I just adopted out a dog that was almost like a feral 10-pound dog here where I am now. And I went through the whole thing and I said, this dog is so good with other dogs. But I said, still, your dog's not going to like this dog necessarily. And they did everything right. It was amazing. And they just wrote me and they said, she finally comes to us. That took 2 weeks for that dog to even go up to them. They did everything that I told them because I told them all the negatives. And now their dogs are playing and sleeping together and they're just in heaven. But that was, it was just a little dog, but it was just terrified of everybody. So like I said, if they do listen, it's great.
Yeah.
And that's where I did the trial period.
Yeah. And those temperament tests, right? I mean, even at a shelter or a rescue, the temperament test is only as strong as the knowledge of the person who's testing it, right? So if you have somebody that's following the book and doesn't really know what they're seeing, you're getting the paint by numbers and well, it did this at this moment and it was actually sick, it wasn't feeling very well, so you didn't get a good response, but you didn't know that.
And maybe it was actually not growling about the food, but it was growling because there's a dog behind you.
Mm-hmm.
You have no idea, But not everybody has the luxury of having foster homes, so it's hard, know.
Right.
Judy had a question. Have you heard of any rescues that place dogs in obedience training at prisons? Do you know any rescues that do that?
I don't. Do you guys?
I think that's shelters that mostly do that because their shelters are state run and they work with the sheriffs and the state to help with those programs.
Right, because you're right, because it's like you've heard of those, but it's
actually a great thing.
Right.
It is. It helps. It helps all involved for sure.
And the liability reasons, then it doesn't fall back on a rescue. It's all state owned.
Yeah. So. And I don't think a rescue would want to do that, honestly, because they would want to feel because they usually have more time and more people that they work with. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I will just tell you this, Pam. Kim Klozik says
I just saw that. Sweetie.
Yeah, Malika.
Kim. It's so
a long time ago.
Yes.
This is this actually Christy and Ann has a question that I wanted to piggyback to. when you decide that this dog is maybe not going to be adoptable, how is it, like, what is the process besides, I mean, I know you've seen a lot of dogs and but I just want, when we're talking about euthanasia, it's not a decision that you're like, okay, that dog's just not going to work out. It is pretty agonizing, the process. So, because I think a lot of people villainize the rescues that you choose to euthanize a dog without really understanding what goes into it and why that decision had to be made. And it's not something that is, you make a decision just like that.
Right. I think when what we did is that if someone was either fostering the dog and was afraid of the dog for one reason, not necessarily maybe they were afraid to place the dog, or the kennel that we had the dog that we were paying had that same issue, we always put it into another foster home, into another situation to get another, or with Nancy or with whoever, to get an idea of what is this dog like in that situation? Was it just that person? And if I actually was afraid of the dog, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So if I actually had a fear of the dog, then I would put the dog to sleep, and I would stay with the dog in its final moments. I did not drop off the dog or anything like that, because if I am scared of the dog, then how could I possibly place the dog? Yeah.
Right.
No, and there had been other people who had been worried about a dog that would give a dog to me that I didn't have problems with. And then we just had to figure out, why did the dog show the issues in that home? And then I felt like the dog was, like I said, would be placeable, but I would euthanize a dog that I was afraid of for sure, or that I was very uncomfortable placing.
Yeah. Well, actually, that reminds me of a dog. We'll get to your question. That reminds me of a dog that we had for a while at my facility. Nico was his name. And he was good, and there was a question about his people, and we could never elicit it. He was in daycare, but we could never elicit it. And I remember the day that I elicited it without knowing. And that dog had been there for weeks, a couple of weeks. One of the volunteers was taking him for class, and he had come to work him in class. And I remember we were doing a recall. I slipped my hand in his collar. He froze and looked at me like, and I knew at that moment, I go, yeah, there it is. This is why. Yeah. And because like I said, like you, it takes a lot to scare me, but it was very clear that was, that's what prompted the behavior. So sometimes it's not so obvious, right?
Right.
That
yeah, but you take that specific situation, right? And well, just don't put your hand in his collar. I mean, he doesn't like that. It's like, no, that's an everyday normal thing. That's not going to work out for humans or dogs, right? So,
yeah,
just having that realistic expectation.
Because it's like, what?
And food aggression is another one that people would be like, don't stick your hand in their bowl. And there are dogs that are just like that. They're bowl possessive, bowl aggressive, however you want to say it. There's a huge difference with the dog that you drop a sandwich on the floor and they try to grab your hand. There's stuff like that. There's things that you have to figure out, what can the average person handle?
Right.
And will it not escalate?
Correct.
Like Taco's did. I mean, that was horrible.
Yeah.
But, so I mean, it's kind of situational.
Right. So Deb had a question. What should a person look for in a rescue that is reputable and not just somebody? Yeah. That, what do you look for in a reputable, like, what's a reputable rescue, that you would look for?
I don't know, except for other adopters. You'd have to talk with other adopters. I don't know. It's not like there's a star chart on, about your rescue, like there is for like Yelp. I don't know how. I think you'd have to talk to other adopters, or you might be able to tell just from social media. I don't know. Social media probably tells you, but you're always going to have a couple people that are not going to be happy, just like Yelp reviews. but you can really tell if the majority of the people that you can see on there are happy, then I think you'd be okay. But I don't know how you can necessarily find one.
Right.
You know?
And I think being on, I think Joanne, you jump in. One of the things that's like, if it doesn't feel right to you, some of the stuff they're asking or some of the stuff they're wanting, if it doesn't feel right to you, you know, like, oh, you have to have a fenced-in yard, or you have to have some kind of, you know, outrageous and like Pam said earlier, attitude. You know, you might want to rethink it, even if, you know, maybe that might not be the.
Yeah, and they might still be reputable and just be over the top, and you might not want to work with that. And that's my whole thing. It used to be, in the beginning, it was the same way. Like, you have to have a fenced yard and you have to have this. Do you really have to have a fenced yard if you have, like, if you're adopting an old, you know, lab mix from me or something? I just think it's that whole situational thing, and it shouldn't be black and white, because not every dog needs a fenced yard. And I have to be honest, when I got my first Doberman, I lived in a studio apartment, and I did more with that dog than when I got an acre that was fenced. I mean, seriously, I never did anything. I opened the door, I let him out, I opened it, closed the door. That was it. And you know, I stopped walking him, I stopped running, you know, but that's what I'm saying is, so again, you have to kind of base it on, and I was, you know, I would have never qualified. I was in a studio apartment. You guys would have been like, Doberman Rescue would have been like, yeah, no. But so I do think that's where I'm saying it's not black and white. It really is situational by the dog and the person, and the, you know.
Right.
Yeah, I think, you know, Deb, if you're really questioning something, like if you have a reason to question it, something doesn't feel right, I think I might ask them what their policies are. Like, do you guys ever take in dogs that have bit before, and what's your policy on that? Or, you know, what do you do if your dog has a behavior case? Do you guys work with them? Or, I mean, just ask some questions. And I think when you ask an open-ended question that's not a yes or a no question, you start to learn a whole lot of the answers, as opposed to somebody who can say, oh yes, nope, we don't do that, right? Make them answer with words instead of a yes or no.
Right. And let's see. Yeah, Lisa Hillman. Yeah, it is very difficult, and Pam could probably talk more to this. But if the dog is a human aggression, it's no matter. It is hard, but you can't put that dog out into the world. You know what I mean? And what should we do with the dog? You know, so, you know, and I think you're right. Prenatal health and sometimes it's not anything that anybody's done. It's just who that dog is.
And if you're actually a rescue and you put out a dog, I'm sorry, but this day and age and the legal stuff that goes on, you are really putting yourself in jeopardy and your whole rescue over one dog. And that's another thing that you have to worry about too, especially this day and age. Everyone sues everybody.
Tell me about it.
Mm-hmm.
What was, Barb,
that's a good question. I saw Barb's question.
Yeah, that's her question was, do rescues have age limit for adopters? I think that's an awesome question.
I do too. And I have to be honest with you, no, they shouldn't. But again, if there's a woman who's like 70 and wants to adopt a puppy, I might say, hey, you know, what they always remember is their dog when it passed away and how they miss a dog. So they want to get a puppy. And I was like, do you remember the 10 years before that when you had it? Do you remember that? Because that's usually how you can talk them into a little bit of an older dog. I did adopt a dog the other day here that it was the person was 70, but I just said, do you have a backup plan? And I didn't say if you die. I just said, do you have a backup plan? Like, what if you do have to be in the hospital? And she said, oh my God, my daughter, we've already talked about it. My daughter's going to take the dog if something happens. I'm fine with that, because honestly, I think they need each other. I think older people, dogs are like, except for that older people like to make their dogs fat. Other than that, it's going to get a lot of older dogs or dogs in from older people. The dogs are so fat.
Yeah.
And they don't jump as much.
I know. But I think they keep each other just young and spry and happy and having that routine. And I really think dogs are great for older people. I really do. So
it's just having a plan, but
I hope they don't get denied for that.
Well, because and that's one of the things, like I think a lot of people in the dog community that are in dog sports, Joanne, would you agree that they do have a kind of a backup plan? Some,
Yeah.
like if something happens to their dogs or that to them, so that their dogs are taken care of. So
Yeah, and I would hope, kind of like Pam said, it's a case by case basis, right? Of my 3 dogs, 2 of them could go with 70-year-olds. The Doberman, he'd kill someone. He'd break somebody's hip. I mean, he would in a second. So it's that's just who he is. So I mean, it would be a dangerous combination, not because he's a mean dog, but just because he's so big and powerful. And
Yep.
So, yep.
Yeah, I know, Rosemary. We're also getting dogs from other parts of the world, which is great. Because we just, we haven't made our own. So anyway, Pam, so what would you, for somebody, because also for some people who are thinking about starting a rescue or doing, stepping in and doing foster care or whatever, what's some advice you can give them for that, if they're thinking about going that route?
Starting up a rescue?
Starting up or fostering for a rescue?
I mean, join my rescue, please. Please foster for us. No, I think starting a rescue, it's not like it's so complicated to do. It's just you got to think about everything like that, because it's not all happiness and you just pet the dogs and then they find a home. There is a lot involved, and there's a lot. I mean, I did do emails and phone calls from morning to night. There's no doubt about that. And I think you have really the key is good relationships with people too. Good relationships with vets, good relationships with trainers, good relationships with a lot of with people that are out there, with donators, with all that. Monetarily, if you're a good rescue, you can usually stay afloat. That's usually okay, because donators believe in you and they see where their money is going, and that the money is truly going into the dogs.
Right.
Be transparent. Be as transparent as you can be. Share everything, whether it's that you had to euthanize a dog, or because I think they need to be a part. They need to feel a part of the rescue. When I ran it, I really did put out emails. Probably I put out emails all the time, but probably weekly. I would say this is everything that's going on, which is time consuming, but it does make you feel a part of it. So starting a rescue, feel free to call me. I'll happily. It's the paperwork that's not even an issue.
Yeah.
It's the rest of it. It's
Right.
just having a plan. And what's going to happen if nobody can foster that dog? Where's the dog going? Do you have a county that you can pay? Because sometimes fosters take the dog and the next day they just can't deal at all. Where's the dog going? You got to have backup plans for everything.
Right. So Barbara and Pat were just saying about some older people. Really quick story. I don't know if Patty Ocon is on here. She was going to foster a special needs dog a few months, maybe a year ago now. She was going to foster a special needs dog. I go, Patty, do they know what your lifestyle's like? Patty is, older, but she's really busy. She brings a dog to class. She works. She's a very, very busy lady. She's always doing stuff. And I go, do you understand what it means to take this dog? I think they're just looking at your age and thinking you're home knitting. And when they realize that you're not, you are going to have a difficult time. And she goes, oh, I didn't think of that. Because, she thinks, most of the people in dogs and they're older, 60s, 70s. They're very active people.
Right.
They're not sitting home knitting. So having a special needs dog is going to be a challenge. So she goes, I go, you should probably give them an idea what your lifestyle is like so they can see if they're going to give you that dog. Because once they hear what you do, I don't think you're going to get it. And sure enough, she goes, yeah, you're right. I go, yeah, because you're never home. You're out and about. How are you going to take care of that dog that can't walk and has all kinds of issues? So it was so yes, I'm with you about some of the older ladies are a lot busier and got a lot more going on than some of the younger ones. So.
That's true. No offense, Barbara. I see her. She's there.
Well,
She's
well,
right.
yeah. Let me.
You know what? I worry about the puppies running under your feet because I swear I feel like I'm always going to trip. Yeah, when they're young and you're like, oh my god, yeah.
Yeah, I worry about me.
Yeah, me too.
Let me save myself there, Barb, because the only thing I would say is just how Pam mentioned earlier, right? At first glance, yeah, big, powerful dog, someone 70 plus, right? Yeah, probably not a good combo. But again, that's why we talk to people. That's why we do home visits, right? That's why you get to know the people, because once you meet them, you can be like, oh, who cares about a giant Doberman? You're good. You got it, you know? So it does matter once you meet the people.
Right.
Yeah, it's true.
So Beth was asking, how do you set adoption fees?
How did we? Well, what we did basically is we just looked at you never make money on a dog. Believe me. I mean, it would be so rare that you did. So it's really not about that. It's can you stay afloat and pay for those ones that you weren't expecting? Like right now in rescue, the ones that we have, like we don't have a lot. We don't do a ton at a time, but we have one that has a bad eye that's going to head off to the eye specialist because the shelter did entropion surgery, but something went wrong. We don't know what. So we're off to the eye specialist with that one. We have one with a urine issue. I have the poodle here that has megaesophagus, who has to eat upright 4 times a day, and is on it's $75 a month for just one drug. And then, so those things all add up. So to make up for that, then you might have the dog that didn't need a lot of vetting. What we did is we just based it on the adoption fees that were around the area there. So we just really kind of based it on that. So we do it according to age. It's not like if you adopt this 3-year-old Bichon, it's going to be more expensive than this 3-year-old lab mix. It's the same. It's just 3 years old. So we were kind of basing it on age. And honestly, the last 4, we took in about 6 really old dogs with medical issues from South Suburban Humane Society last month. And we knew what we were getting. One had congestive heart failure and was 14. One had major skin issues we just did a biopsy on. One had liver failure, and one had Magnum just had the dental. So our adoption fee normally would have been $200 for a senior dog, but we weren't going to charge $200 for, I love the cat on there, for a senior dog, for a 14-year-old dog with heart failure that they're going to have to keep on meds. So we didn't tell them that, but we said, please, the dog is yours for free. I mean, I just don't want that to be the reason behind it. So when they came for the adoption, we said, please, there's no fee involved. And they gave us a donation, which was wonderful. But honestly, we sort of, again, it's our discretion to do that at the time, but that's kind of how we based our fees. But it really is, it never really, especially cats, you lose money on every single cat, but that's not your reason for doing it. I mean, right. For doing rescue, but you can't make money on a cat. Sorry, love your cat, but you can't make money.
And Pam, I'm just curious, you seem to be doing a lot of bulldogs now, and clearly with Dobermans, right? Both of them are on the low scale of healthy dogs. So, you do see a lot more expensive vet care. Do you think that played a role in being a little bit more of an expensive adoption fee just because the vet care going into the rescue was higher?
I don't know if that was, we based it basically off of Adopt in Naperville. And then we went and looked at some other rescues that were all in the general area. And we just kind of went on that. But we actually only have one bulldog in rescue now. If you notice, we tend to do a lot of seniors.
Yeah.
Just I really like the seniors and the special needs dogs.
Yeah.
So we do that.
Yeah. It just makes me sad that there are so many seniors going to rescue. I couldn't imagine giving up a senior girl, even though,
Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, this one that I have up for adoption that's 15 years old with 3 legs is the most amazing dog I have fostered in ages. He does nothing wrong. He's unbelievable. Yeah. And he's spry as can be. He zooms out, zooms in. If you want to go see him on our website, unfortunately, he's in Arizona, so nobody will be able to adopt him that's in Illinois. But he goes to the bathroom. After he goes to the bathroom, he does a handstand and walks across the whole yard. It's the cutest thing you've ever seen. So
it's a really good video.
Cutest thing I've ever seen. And he does it every time. It's just adorable. He's 15. They surrendered him to me. I don't even remember how they found out about me. They surrendered him to me and told me they thought he was 8. And then I said, well, can you find out? And I always, again, I don't put them on the defense. I just said, can you find out, what vet he went to before you guys got him? Because they had taken him in from a man who had passed away. I said, I would just love to find out, what his past was. And when I called the vet, he was 15. I knew he wasn't 8 because he has cataracts like you can't believe. But I didn't think he was 15. So he's amazing. Amazing little guy. But yeah.
Wow. That's so, I couldn't imagine, like I said, giving up my old dog.
No, me neither. Well, sometimes I could, but I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
Sometimes I could come up. I got one that barks every time I go on Zoom.
Yeah. My senior now. Yes, my senior dogs are very demanding.
Sure.
Yes. I couldn't imagine changing them for the world. So yeah. All right. We can go on and on, but thank you, Pam, for just kind of having this candid discussion about, because it's like, I don't know, again, why things are changing, but it's like, we really just need to think about that and really, really figure out how we're going to have the rescues be a little bit more responsive. I mean, not that there's some not great rescues out there. I know a few that are wonderful, but some of them are just, I'm seeing things going in a really scary direction. So, yeah.
And I see that too. And people understand when you euthanize for health, if you, for the dog, you can't, but they don't understand that temperament is health. It's mental health.
Right.
And it's, Yeah.
Hey, Pam, they're asking what's your website?
Lost Cove Animal Sanctuary, right, Pam?
Yeah. LostCoveAnimalSanctuary.com. We are under construction. Our website is, because again, I thought I was going to stay really, really small and I needed this tiny little website and I was only going to have like one dog up for adoption, but that all changed. So we are building it bigger, but it's still there. So basically I'm posting a lot more on Facebook than I am until our website's finished.
So Lost Cove.
Lost Cove Animal Sanctuary. And Lost Cove, again, as I know it's a strange name in Illinois, but when I moved to North Carolina, we lived in Lost Cove. So that's why it was called Lost Cove. And now I live in Arizona, so it's getting really confusing.
And then we found a rooster and
then I found a rooster and his feet fell off from frostbite and he started the whole rescue. He has no feet. If you want to watch he's on the news. You can watch him on the website too. He was on the news. We tried to get him a prosthetic foot.
Oh, wow.
It didn't work. Yeah. He had a little prosthetic shoe. It was adorable.
Not
but don't keep that on.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. And we'll see you all next week. We're going to have a canine fitness person on. So stay tuned for next week. Thank you, Pam.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm going to start tuning in. And everyone have a happy new year.
Yep. Happy New Year, everybody. Oh my God.